Here's how I made this little crochet balloon gift. It was my Auntie Em's birthday, my Grammy's little sister, and I wanted to send her something special in the mail. So I decided to crochet her balloons, and she loved them. So in this video, I'll show you exactly how I made them. I played around a bunch with the sizing, and once I decided how I wanted to make the balloons, I realized I need to make them smaller. So in this video, I'll show you how I made the original size balloons, but also how I modified to make a smaller balloon that would fit in the frame. For my materials, I used crochet hooks, some yarn, a safety pin to mark my spot, because circles can be confusing. Of course, the frame and some construction paper or craft paper to put with it. I think that's it. Probably scissors too. Let me go into a little bit more detail about the yarn and the hook though, because that's important. I used DK weight yarn, not for any particular reason besides the fact that I had a lot of colors of the DK yarn, so that's perfect for a bunch of colorful balloons. It probably would have been easier if I used a lighter weight yarn, but that's what I did. I played around a lot with the sizing of the balloons, not only by modifying the pattern, but trying different smaller hooks. DK weight yarn says use 4mm hook, but I actually, for my small balloons, sized down to a 2.75mm, so that's a lot smaller. But yeah, that's everything I used. And today, I'm actually going to be sizing up to worsted weight yarn, making a bigger balloon with a 4.5mm hook. Hopefully that will be easier for you to see. As I mentioned, I'm going to be following my original pattern, and I'll also include notes on how to make the mini balloon in case anyone wants to try that or just curious on how I modified it. I've broken down the pattern into 3 sections, the top, the middle, and the end, and I'm not going to be talking through this whole video, but I'll touch base at the important parts of each section. Here are the abbreviations. It's a simple pattern. Everything is a single crochet, and you'll need to know how to increase and decrease. We start the pattern with a magic circle. I love working with magic circles, but if you don't, you can still do a variation of a chain and working 6 crochets into that. That's actually how they do it in all the vintage patterns. So I wonder when magic circles started. I wonder if Auntie M, do you know how to do a magic circle? Okay, I'm getting distracted. All right, let's talk about the top of the balloon. The rows in the top of the balloon have a pattern, and if you can figure it out, you could modify the balloon on your own. Every row starts with an increase, has a certain amount of single crochets, and then 2 increases in the middle, single crochet ending on an increase. And remember, we're working in a circle, not a line, so our first increase will be next to our last increase. Confusing visuals, I know. The only thing that changes with each row is the amount of single crochets in between. Do what you want with that information. Maybe it's helpful if you want to modify the balloon, or if I confused you, hopefully it clears things up once I start the pattern. So once we finish up our 6 single crochets into a magic circle, we're ready to start our round and begin the increase stitch like I just talked about. We'll be working the round into our first single crochet from the magic circle. And I always struggle with this because I always do the first one way too tight, just always. Quick review for beginners. An increase stitch is a single crochet, actually 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So 1 stitch becomes 2 in the next row. I might be making this extra confusing. You can probably find many amazing tutorials on YouTube. Before you move on to that second stitch of the increase, make sure you mark your first stitch. Because we're working in a circle, it's so easy to lose your spot and it's just not worth it. I always think I can remember and I don't. So I'm gonna wrap up talking for now. At the top you have the pattern instructions, so good luck. Congrats, you finished the top of the balloon. Like I said, here is the notes for everything we just did, but you can also compare it with the mini balloon. It's essentially the same exact thing, except we skip row 5 and use a smaller hook. If you look closely at the top of the balloon, you can kind of see where the increases are. They're a little bit larger than our single crochets, and they make a line across the center of the balloon. We want to keep an eye on these because later when we fold the balloon, we want to fold it right at those increase stitches. So to help visually, I'm going to add a stitch marker into these 2 increases. You can do this or don't do this, but it will come in handy later on. We're ready for the middle, and I don't really have much to say about it because it's really repetitive. Single crochet into each stitch for 6 rows. I don't even film myself doing it the entire time because it's just so repetitive. I'll spare you. But I do want to note that I do 6 rounds. You don't have to do that many. You can do more or less. If you do more, the balloon will be longer. And if you do less, the balloon will look more round. I honestly prefer the rounded look, so I kind of wish I did 5. But if you want to copy me, I do 6. It's all preference. It's up to you. Just remember to use your stitch marker when working in circles so you don't lose your spot. It's not fun when you lose your spot and you have to try to count how many rows you did. Good luck. Coming up to the end of row 11, and this is where things get a little bit weird. Like I mentioned, we're going to be folding the balloon in half, and we want to make sure the creases of the fold line up with our increase stitches. You'll notice that my stitch marker is shifted a little bit to the side. It's not at the actual crease of the fold, so I'm going to want to adjust it by squishing it around to bring those increases so they're lined up with the edges of the fold. Just pretend there was a stitch marker on the other side too, but you can see the larger increases are also on the edge of the fold. Now that we have that lined up beautifully, we have a new problem and where things get a little weird. So we want to start the beginning of the next row at the front of the fold, except if you look, we're kind of placed behind the fold. We're wrapped around the back. So we're just going to cheat and add in, depending where you are, 2 to 3 extra stitches to kind of bring you back around to the front of the fold. Then you can put the stitch marker back in like nothing ever happened. It was there the whole time. And that's where you'll be starting your next round. So we moved from the back of the fold to the front side of the fold, which is important because we're going to be lining up our decreases, which are coming in the next round, with our increases. Here's everything we did for the middle. So we did 6 rounds of single crochet into each stitch. That'd be row 6 through 11. But for the mini one, I actually only did, I think, 3 rows, 3 or 4. So if you're doing the mini, row 5 through 7. But again, you can do as many as you want. And then don't forget to fold the piece and line it up like we just talked about. You've made it to the end, and I wish this was as simple as the other sections, but the rows are just kind of random. Some rows are like the top, but instead they have decreases. Some have single crochet all the way around. Some have decreases all the way around. Even the end has some increases. So it's a little bit of everything. Quick reminder on how to decrease. Push your hook through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through. Put your hook through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through. Now you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3 of those. 2 stitches become 1. Just a warning, you're gonna watch me struggle through the end a little bit. It's tricky because it gets smaller, and I'm also holding my tension way too tight, so it makes it even more difficult. Hopefully you don't have such a hard time and you can still follow along with what I'm doing. Good luck again. Watching the footage back, I can tell I really struggled with row 15. It's all decreases, so it's very tricky. Hopefully it's not as hard for you. I like to think that my other balloons I did a better job, but that's just the reality of it sometimes. So it doesn't look as great, and it makes the next row even harder. But here we are. I'm not going to be a perfectionist. I don't want to film this again, so sorry it's not my best balloon. For row 17, the very last row, I put some question marks because I never do it exactly the same. The last row we're working with 7 stitches, and it bugs me that it's not an even 6, so that's why I switched it up. I usually do like 1 increase stitch, 2 single crochets, 1 increase stitch, 3 single crochets, but you can mix that up or even switch some of the single crochets to another increase. We just want the bottom of the balloon to flare out. So complete that row however it pleases you, and then I'm jumping to the end where I do a slip knot and then cut the yarn and pull it through, except I did it backwards and I cut the yarn really short and I had to do my best slip knot with short yarn. So don't do that. But then you can weave the loose ends in and you have your balloon. Here are the notes for everything I did or tried to do at the end of the balloon. You'll notice that the mini and the original are very similar. The mini just starts 2 rows back on the original. So row 8 for the mini is row 14 for the original. Don't forget to tie a string so your balloon won't float away. I'm sorry. Okay, so I grab a white piece of yarn, or you can do any color, and I tie it tightly around the neck of the balloon. And then I take the long end and weave it through the center hole of the balloon. I know that's not how balloons work, but I found it helpful for when I was gluing the balloons down flat. Then I just weave in the short end to hide it. And that's all it takes, except now you gotta repeat the process so you have a little bundle of balloons. But great work! Now I'll walk you through the end process of my final project of putting in the frame. It's very straightforward. I didn't want to place the balloons directly on the glass because it was like reflective and annoying, so I decided to get some craft paper and cut it out the exact size of the frame. At first I did it too big and it like wrinkled a little bit, but then I cut it down and I fixed it, and I had a fully new surface to work off of. I played around with the balloons a little bit to decide where I wanted to place them, and once I felt happy with their placement, I began to glue them directly to the craft paper. I attached all the strings together and then used a little bit of glue to hold them into place, then tied it into a bow and trimmed the loose ends, and I was done. And I was very happy with my work, and so was Auntie M. Little bit of a long video, but that's how I made my balloons and my little balloon frame. I am on to my next creative project. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and you made it this far and you want to see more crafting videos, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.